Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today we are speaking with Sandy Lowres. Sandy is a writer, creative, and podcaster based in Melbourne's West. She is the founder and creative director of Wb40, Women Beyond 40 magazine, and the podcast host of the Good Girl Confessional. Sandy has enjoyed a diverse and interesting career spanning business owner, manager, coordinator, writer, blogger, and creative. She has never been afraid to challenge herself and has always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Sandy has always been passionate about women's rights, and through her long-standing blog, she created a community of amazing women who are now a part of this Wb40 tribe. Sandy, I'm really looking forward to learning more about your story. Please, could you tell us a little bit about your path to this point?
Hi, and thanks so much for having me on here, Jolie. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited. First of all, I'm loving your podcast as well. I think it's so amazing to meet another person who's really out there highlighting the lives of people over 40. That's so brilliant. More about my career. Wow. It's really fascinating that while the pandemic was a really difficult time for so many people, what I also saw was there were so many creatives who were launching into new spheres. They were doing things like podcasts, and they were definitely writing books, and they were making art. And for me, on the tail end or the back end of the podcast, during the pandemic really gave me enough time to finally launch our magazine, which is available in both print and digital, which was no mean feat. And it just really gave us enough time to really think about, crazy. But I often say this, and it's true. I'm so glad I didn't realize how much work was involved, because I think sometimes, especially in our age demographic, if I had known that, I might have been more hesitant to do it. But I'm so thrilled that we have done it, that it's out there, and it's a gorgeous magazine, and it's really been a testament to the collaboration of so many extremely wonderful women. And in the background is my partner, the only man on our team, who does all of the tech, the website, putting together the actual layout of the magazine. It really has been such a collaborative and beautiful process, and I'm really thrilled about that.
That's great. What was your inspiration for this in this space, if you will?
Yeah, the inspiration really came from, so as you mentioned, many years ago, I started a blog called the Good Girl Confessional, and it was really about talking about sex and dating and relationships beyond the age of 40, when I found myself single after a divorce, a very long-term marriage. And jumping into that space of dating was really quite scary. And then through writing the blog, what I realized, there was a whole community of women out there who were going through the same thing, who were experiencing this kind of stepping into a whole new chapter of their lives. And through that, we built this lovely community of women. And from there, as it went on, it became less and less of a personal blog and started really to be about women's issues. And as you so rightly say, I am very passionate about the rights of women, and certain things would make me really angry. And women of all ages definitely face sexism, and we face different issues. But what I was finding from talking to so many women was that beyond the age of 40, not only were they facing sexism, but they were also facing ageism. And what I really wanted to do was to actually have a platform where women could tell their stories about what was going on in their lives. And so from there, I woke up one morning and it was like a light bulb moment of saying, I think I'm going to start a podcast. I think I'm going to turn the Good Girl into a podcast. And it just happened very quickly. We got the podcast set up, and my very first few guests were really close friends of mine who were all really incredibly interesting women. And I asked them to come on and tell their story. And what happened was something really remarkable, where these women felt not vulnerable at all. They were quite okay to show their true selves and to share their stories with such honesty. And that, for me, I was just in reverence of these women doing that. And it just has gone on and on from there. So the podcast was a really beautiful starting point, and we still have the podcast going, and I love it. It is actually one of my great joys in life to speak with really interesting women. It's such a privilege, isn't it? It's really amazing.
It really is.
It really is. And there's so many.
It carries you through. It does. For the listeners, we were actually talking about this before we started, about how wonderful the podcast that we both started to try to help other people has brought so much joy and help into our own lives. And it is a gift. So it's been wonderful. I'm curious, what has been most important to you, would you say, to lead to your success?
I think it really was having some belief, of course, in myself. I have always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I think you mentioned that before, and it's true. I tend to, rather than, I'm not a huge planner. So instead of going, I'm going to write out this huge plan of where I want something to go, if I'm really passionate about something, I'm the kind of person who sort of leaps first and thinks about it later. And it's really carried me through, and I'm really glad that I have. I think one of the big things, and I think this is true of all business owners or entrepreneurs or podcasters or creators, is to really follow your own instinct and your own gut, and to have a belief in what it is that you are doing. And I know that there's a lot of, especially amongst women, there is a lot of imposter syndrome out there. So women do really amazing things, and then they're so terrified that they're not good enough, or it's not going to be enough. No one's going to listen. So the one thing that I've always done is, first and foremost, I wanted to create a platform that was for other women. But if nobody listened, that would be okay, because I was listening to their stories and their voices. And I think if you come from a place of authenticity in that, then that was okay. And of course, what happened was that the stories of these women are incredible. And of course, people are listening to their stories, which is so wonderful. The inspiration really for the magazine then came from in hearing all of these amazing stories and we were already planning the magazine, but during the COVID-19 pandemic, so many people were out of work. Creatives especially were so badly hit. They were losing all income. And that was everyone from musicians to artists to writers, you name it. And so it seemed to outsiders a really odd time then to start a print magazine, because the publishing world had been so badly hit. But actually for me, what it did was fuel a fire in me to really get it out as quickly as we can, because we've now created paid opportunities for female writers to get their stories out there. But actually it was a really lovely vehicle then to interview other women and tell their stories. So this is a magazine that is written by women for women over the age of 40, 50, 60 and beyond. And so we wanted them to be, the stories to be real, and we wanted people to be able to share their stories and with interviewers who genuinely had their best interests at heart. So there's no clickbait celebrity gossip in this magazine. We have an incredible fashion editor who is Nikki Hind, and she is Australia's first legally blind fashion designer, which is incredible. She's extraordinary. And Julie, you'd love to speak with her. She's just mind-blowing. But Nikki came on board to be the fashion editor, but we wanted to come at fashion even from a very different angle, because I was really quite tired of this sort of body shaming, image shaming thing that goes on for women, especially after the age of 40, that if you have any wrinkles, or if you have grey hair, or if you're a curvy girl like me, that society was like really piling on. So Nikki has come to these fashion editorials with such a beautiful viewpoint of talking about what is inclusive fashion, what does that look like, talking about different kinds of designers, Indigenous designers and ethical designers, and what does that mean. And I think we've just decided to take a real rethink on what is a magazine for women over the age of 40.
This is brilliant. This is what we need. This is what we need. There's so much influence around us that is horrendous, really. It really is. And it's just the norm. It's the norm of what is being put out there. And it's slowly eroding the souls of women. And so thank you for putting out something that will build up the souls of women. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Jolie. I love that. Thank you. And that's really what it is about. It's about helping women to rise. And I rise, that's such a cliche thing, but I mean it in the sense of every way, that women can feel good about themselves, that women can pick up a magazine and read the stories of other women who, who may not be like them, but they actually say, wow, that's incredible. Look what she's doing over the age of 40. We've had some brilliant people that we've interviewed for this magazine. One is Gail Kennedy. She's an incredible writer and author. She's an Indigenous Aboriginal Australian author, but she didn't start her writing career until 51. And she's now won so many awards and she's doing so many amazing things. So she's just a really great example. Gail's a really great example of how women we can pivot, we can change our career, we can do different things beyond the age of 40. It's just that society keeps telling us that we can't. And I think during the pandemic, as I was saying before, it's incredible how many people pivoted, certainly through necessity, but sometimes it was because for the first time, me included, to have time to sit and actually think, how am I going to make something work? There are so many women out there now doing incredible side hustles, but also who created incredible businesses through COVID. It was quite mind-blowing. So yeah, we're really interested in telling the stories of those women. And the women that we've had on the podcast and the women who we're so privileged to have in this magazine are all so different from one another. It's very diverse. It's pretty fantastic. And the women that we've had on our we're talking activists and disruptors and business leaders, survivors. One of the women who's been on our podcast, Claire Ashman, is extraordinary. She's a cult survivor and she's done 4 TEDx talks. And there are so many incredible stories. And when you scratch the surface of any woman, every woman has a story. And I think it's really nice for women to be able to listen to the podcast or pick up the magazine and actually think, wow, I'm actually in good company. Yes, there's a huge community of amazing women out there, right? Doing really cool things. And,
and I belong to it.
And I belong to it. I'm part of that. Yeah, we love it.
I love that you started this in the pandemic and made that leap regardless of what's happening. Because that's where success comes from, is in those moments, if you will. So of all the things you've done, what would you say has been one or two of your greatest successes, if you will?
I would definitely say, first and foremost, I would have to say that I'm the mother of 3 children who are now grown-ups. That's my 100% zenith of success there. They're really great human beings and I feel really proud of that. I think in terms of business, I would definitely say that the Good Girl Confessional and WB40 in my heart of hearts is my greatest success so far, because it isn't just about me. It really is about a community of women and it really is about helping others. And even though, as you were saying before, and it's so true, in helping women highlight their businesses or tell their stories or have them write for us and get paid for it, through all of those things, I will say that it fills my soul too. And that's what success is, I've learned. So I think it's such a pleasure to do it. It's an absolute passion project.
Would you say that's your definition of success?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually would. I think I always knew that I wanted to help other women, and I always knew I wanted to especially have their voices heard. And so I think to create what we've already created is a testament to that. I mean, it is built on the foundation of that, and that's what it's all about. It's really incredible. And when I say paid opportunities, one of the things I do want to highlight here is that I could never do this magazine without the collaboration of certain women who have, for each issue so far, we've got a food editor and a fashion editor. Our food editor is Sandra Reynolds, and I'll shout out to her because she's incredible. She's a published cookbook author and just an incredible human and a great friend. Nikki Hind, who's our fashion editor. Amalia Chilianas, who writes regularly about changing careers after the age of 40. What does that look like? Because what we realized was so many people were faced with losing jobs or faced with being, as you say, let go, or their work was being downsized, so their hours were being cut, or they were sitting at home during COVID thinking, I really do not want to go back to that job. What am I going to do now? Yes. And so Amalie has been fantastic in terms of highlighting different ways to think about how we as women over the age of 40, 50 and 60, it's a scary thing to say, what am I going to do now? And how do I change direction?
And actually make that change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, deal. And
It
especially
really
this
is.
time in our lives, we have very set families and mortgages, and it's much different. And so I think that a lot of people hold themselves back. And that's why I love what you're doing, and just highlighting people who are putting themselves into that fear, if you will, or making those changes and living their lives fully and really just experiencing that. And so I love that you're sharing that to help other people find that themselves. It's really
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. And some of the stories in the magazine are from women who have just gone through some sort of extraordinary journeys as well. And through telling their stories, I think that's helpful for other women as well. For women who pick up that magazine and read that story and see themselves reflected back, that's hugely important. And I think it is really important that we start changing the narrative of women in society, that we, for the most part, I do believe women want to see other women succeed. They want to see other women rise. They want to see other women be happy and successful. And this narrative that society, if you like, and especially the patriarchy likes to tell us, that women are bitchy and that we fight against each other, I think we need to start changing that narrative as well. And that's what this magazine to me has been hugely symbolic of, is that there is no shortage of incredible women who reach out and say, we would love to write for you, or can I tell my story, or you should really speak to this other woman because she's incredible. And so we're seeing that all the time. And that's proof that women really want to just help other women.
Yes, you're right. We need to change that narrative. It's an antiquated narrative at this point. So what would you say has been your greatest challenge or greatest obstacle or failure that you had to deal with, and what you learned from it?
Yeah, look, so over the years, I've done many things, and one of which was I was a business owner before. And many years ago, I had a boutique retail store dealing in dancewear, and I loved it. And it was pretty exciting. And my daughter danced, and I stepped into it. And as it turned out, it was during the end of having that business, my marriage had taken a nosedive, was basically falling apart, and we were separating, and I just couldn't hold on to the business. And so for me, that was really difficult. But what I realized afterwards
Oh, wow.
was,
So I was going to say, but you went through a divorce and
oh yeah,
losing this business at the
and
same
losing this
time.
business,
That
absolutely,
is a lot of change.
a
Okay,
lot.
keep going. And then please tell me how you got through this.
Yeah. And it was a lot. And as we all know, when it rains, it pours. So at that time, I think my marriage was ending. My father had passed away. My father-in-law had died.
Oh,
And my business
sorry.
ended. It was a really tough time. And then, of course, like jumping into a new job to pay, the bills and to support 3 children. And that was really difficult. But looking back now, what I realized is it wasn't a failure. What it was, a huge learning. And it was a massive learning opportunity. It took me a long time to look back and think, wow, I did that. I owned a business, and I did that, and I built it. I sold it onto someone else. So when I bought it, it was quite small, and then it got bigger, and I was able to sell it off to someone else. So when I look at that, you say it wasn't a failure at all. She's continued on with that business. But I think as women, we're so hard on ourselves, and we do expect ourselves to be doing amazing things and to be achieving all the time. But I think, and that's the other thing I've really learned through all of this, is changing the narrative, not just about other women and how society speaks about women, but I've had to change the narrative about how I speak about myself and how I feel about myself. And so that's been a huge learning curve. Yeah.
Now, how did you do that though?
It took a little while. I think really it was part of my healing from the divorce and the loss of the business and all of the things was I do what I love to do, which is to write. And so I decided I would start this blog. I had no idea how to be a blogger. And I launched in, and I originally wrote under a pseudonym because I had young teenage children. And of course I was talking about my dating experiences out there in the real world. And I decided I would, because I was writing under a pseudonym and I was a little bit probably ignorant at that time, but because it's all out there on the internet. But anyway, I decided I'm going to be really honest about this. And that didn't occur to me. That was a brave thing to do. Later, I would be told by many women, you were so brave. There's no way I'd be telling those stories. And it was like the good, the bad, and the ugly of dating. But I think what was really nice about that Now what I'm seeing all these years later is how many women are doing that and how they are talking about their experiences, and it's fantastic. At the time when I was doing it, there wasn't really many people around. I think there was an American blogger and there was someone in England maybe who was doing it. And so here I was. I'm writing under a pseudonym. No one really knew who I was. And Vogue India actually listed me as one of the 5 top blogs to look out for. And they actually said because it was Vogue India. They're like, wow, this girl's like telling it exactly how it is. And I was like, what?
You were paving the way for the authenticity. That's the thing. And being brave with the realness. That's you brought it in because that's what it's all about these days, just being real.
Yeah, well, now it is. But at the time, I think I was going against the grain a little bit. But there were some amazing Australian bloggers that I was following at the time who were not talking about sex and dating, but they were talking about their experiences of parenthood. I don't like the term mummy blogger because I think dads write blogs and they're not called daddy bloggers. So female bloggers who are out there, but really talking about the reality and the truth of parenting, how hard it can be, the joys, the highs, the lows. I really respected those women and thought, well, now to me, that's brave. Like talking about breaking down this narrative of us trying to be the perfect parent, which of course, there's no such thing. We all know that. So I think I was really buoyed by them. And even though I went into a completely different sphere, if you like, it was fun. At the time, Sex in the City and programs like that were breaking taboos and starting to break down this definition of what does a woman over 40 look like. And that's fantastic. But it was for me, when I started to talk more about women's issues, even that for me, I realized that there are many ideals that are set. Like I love Sex in the City, but there's no way I could look like any of those women. And I wasn't in New York and we're not all rich and successful. And it's all of those kind of things. How do you speak to the ordinary person about this is my life experience? The only way I knew how to do that was through complete honesty. Eventually, and it was really interesting. So all the men that I dated, of course, I just gave them code names. I didn't give anybody's name away or who they were or what they were doing. And I ended up in a relationship for 4 years. And of course I was writing about him and he knew. He knew. And I think eventually dating, I was like, listen, I have this blog. I'm just going to tell you, you don't know what it is and you don't need to know what it is. And eventually, of course, as the relationship progressed, I said to him, you probably should know what this blog is. And he said, have you been talking about me? And I said, yes. And so for him, it was really interesting because it was one of those relationships that went up and down. And so I'm talking about the highs and the lows of this relationship. And he went back and thankfully, I think it was a little bit of an ego stroke. He was quite fine about it. And he got to the point where he said, oh, what did you write about on the blog this week? If it's not about me, I can't be bothered reading it. And I was like, wow. So I think I sort of took a leap of faith at some point though and went, right, I'm just going to put it out there. This is who I am. All of my dear friends, my really close friends knew. My children knew I had a blog, although they didn't read it. I think my eldest son, who by the way is now 30, but when he was maybe around, I don't know how old he was, early 20s, he decided that, I don't know, he decided he was going to read some of it. And then I remember him saying to me, oh my God, Mom, I can't believe you wrote about this stuff. And then he was like, I'm never reading it again. Oh God. And I was like, honey, I didn't write it for you. So, yeah, that was a pretty funny moment.
I have 2 teenage boys, I can imagine. That's great. That's really great.
It was kind of funny. But I eventually started talking less and less about myself and the personal stuff, and it was more and more about women's issues. And I was inviting other women to come on and be guest bloggers and guest writers, which was fantastic, and because they were bringing like a whole different feel to it. And then I decided that, look, you just put it out there. So I put my name on it. I stamped my name on it. I was waiting for some sort of backlash because I had been warned by other bloggers who'd done that sometimes there's a bit of a pile on from followers who thought you were someone different, perhaps, but at the end of the day, it was always my face. I had a whole shoot done for the blog, which I still use to this day for the podcast. And I think everyone was just really kind and brilliant and lovely. And I was writing for other people under that pseudonym too, which was funny because they were saying, oh, do you want to write an article? And I'm like, yeah, but I have to write it under a pseudonym because it's not really my name. But once I put my name out there, actually it was a seamless thing. It didn't really matter. There were a few people who reached out, a few followers who said, I had absolutely no idea who you were, but this is fantastic. It's so great to finally put a name to it. So that was really nice. And from there, that kind of, I think, gave me license to pivot, because I found I was writing less and less on the blog, but wanting to tell the stories of other women. And so the new iteration of that blog turning into a podcast has been like a dream come true, if I'm honest. I think it feels much more authentic to me in this space to now be doing that and sharing the stories of other women. Like, my stories out there. It's just really nice to be able to share the stories of other women.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And you carry those stories with you. At least I do. I know I carry all those stories with me, and I find myself just growing exponentially after every conversation. So it's really wonderful. I'm curious, because out of all the things that you've learned through life, through this process, what would you say has brought the most benefit to yourself personally?
Oh, that's a big question, Jolie. I think I've learnt that I can make mistakes and that is okay. And I can learn from those mistakes. I think, and you would know this being a podcaster yourself, when you put yourself out there, you have such a I certainly had a high expectation of myself to get everything right all the time. And then you realize certain things are out of your control. And writing for the magazine, but publishing the magazine is exactly the same. The way you think things might work out are completely different in the end from how it works out. So I've had to learn to be less controlling over the way I think things are supposed to look and feel and be, and to actually let go a little bit and just go with that flow. I think it's made me far more relaxed, and I think that's been such a gift. And don't get me wrong, with the magazine, there's so much stress. Like, it's hard work. It's really hard work, and it's nonstop because we're bi-monthly, so that's a lot of work involved. But I will say it's actually a passion project, so it doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like it's really oppressive or anything like that. I just love it. It's a gift. I have had to learn to let go. I will say, when the first magazine came out, the first print of that magazine had so many errors in it, and I remember just thinking, oh, I'm going to die. I can't believe people had their hands on it. At the end of the day, everyone was incredibly brilliant, gracious, fantastic. And then when we had to do a reprint because we sold out of the first one, we were able to then get the things fixed up. And at that stage, so good. Yeah. And I just have to realize, and a friend of mine said, when we did the reprint and it was all right, I said to her, here, you can have it. And she said, oh, no, I want the original. I'm happy with the original, because she said to me, that's like a collector's edition. And I'm holding the very first one in my hand. Yeah. That for me was tough.
I completely understand. But I love this example that you just gave. It's so important, because it's when you make those mistakes, the things that you were really afraid of making, you wanted that first one to be perfect. I fully get this. I completely understand all of those emotions coming in at you. And then for not to have those mistakes that you were so concerned about having, being upset about it, and then it all just working out just fine. And realizing that's a gift too. When you make a mistake or that thing that you were really scared of happens, and then you just keep moving forward anyway. And oh, look, your life is no different. Everything's the same. It's like, oh yeah, I can make mistakes. It's okay. It's human. It's very freeing and empowering. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. And it just has been. And I think just learning to be like, of course, I still want to get everything right. And there's no two ways about that. I do. But at the end of the day, learning that things happen. And I'm constantly reminded by really brilliant people who say, you have these huge publishing houses with huge teams of people, and the mistakes get through. So at the end of the day, we're a tiny team, and I feel like it's like everything that you do, any business that you have, every new magazine that comes out is a whole new experience, because they're different stories, but we're learning so much more about how publishing works and how to get the word out there. And I think that's been really fantastic as well. It's been such a steep learning curve. And one I can see I will just keep learning with. I don't think I'll ever stop learning. So as many magazines that come out, I'm sure I'll learn something new each and every time. And that's fantastic. That's been really cool. So it's been challenging. And I think challenging yourself, especially at this, like I'm 51, and I think to challenge myself at 51 and start a magazine at 50 during a pandemic now I can see it as, yeah, that was epic. That was really epic. At the time, it just felt like it was the thing to do. It was the right thing for me me to do. And I guess I was just going to say, I love that on your podcast, you're talking to people, men and women, about exactly that, right? About the things that people do in the second half of their life. And when they say life begins at 40, I 100% believe that. I think I went through some pretty traumatic experiences in terms of divorce and whatever, but you come out the other side, and someone once said to me, this is a great term, I love it, that you grow longer legs and you take bigger strides. And I think that's very true. And I think as a woman, I feel like I only started to come into my own really in my 40s, and now in my 50s, I feel probably more empowered than ever. And I don't know if I'm even allowed to swear on this podcast, but in the words of Helen Mirren, the wonderful actress, who says you get to an age where you just have less fucks to give or no fucks to give. And I think that's true.
Yes.
Right. I think it is about, and that's not in terms of anyone else. It's not saying I don't care about other people. I absolutely do. It's really, though, about I'm caring less about the judgment of others in terms of things that I really want to do, of putting the magazine out there. A great example of that was being told originally when I was starting the magazine journey, I thought probably I would need investment or funding. And so I was put in touch with, I spoke to a couple of male investors who said to me, we can't see how anyone would ever want to read the stories of women over 40. And that just put a fire under me. It just put a fire under me. And really my attitude at that point was, I'm sure my eyes narrowed, but I just thought, watch me.
Yes.
Because they're wrong.
Yes.
They're wrong. And there's so many kick-ass women out there doing amazing things. So we did it as an independent magazine in the end, rather than taking investment and funding. And all of the sales of this magazine go back indirectly to paying writers. And not just writers, there's other creatives. On the cover of each, there's the first edition, which we love. This artwork was created by...
I love the cover.
Isn't it beautiful? I'll just let everyone know. It is Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the cover of the first edition, and this artwork was created for WB40 by a young female artist who's in Sydney in Australia named Kathy Frank. And Kathy created this artwork of... I basically said Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away. I was quite devastated, like a lot of women in the world were, about that. And so she created this amazing artwork of Ruth, and inside of Ruth is the images of Australia's very first and only female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, who gave a very iconic speech, which is now known as the misogyny speech in Parliament. And so she's actually embedded Julia Gillard into the image of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as well as the first women who were fighting on the front line for women's rights in the 70s. It's just beautiful. It's a fantastic piece of art. But one of the things that we decided, or I decided this was my thing, but was for each edition of the magazine there would be different artwork, and that it would be a different artist every time, and we could highlight those female artists. We pay them a cover fee to use their art on the cover, and then within the magazine we do a whole page and we talk about who they are as an artist and really get them out there, because it's so difficult for female creatives to get their art out there, their work out there, and their name out there. So that's been one of my absolute highlights. I'm absolutely loving it. The second edition of the magazine, so again, another young female artist who's in Jordan, who I've been following her work for some time, and I reached out and said, look, I just love what you do, and it's fun and it's bright and it's brilliant. The second edition of the magazine is so radically different. I don't know if we're in audio, people can't see this, but it's illustrative and fun and beautiful, and it's actually a heart. And within the heart is a whole lot.
Oh, it's really colorful. Yes.
Yeah. And it's pink, and it's got this beautiful kind of illustrated heart, and it's called Secrets of the Heart. And so each of our magazines has a different theme. The first one was hard-won wisdom, because we like to say that the wisdom of women is hard won. It's never just handed to you on a silver platter. The second edition was Love and Other Catastrophes, and we wanted to explore love in all different forms, which is beautiful. And the third edition, which hits this week, the artist is an Aboriginal contemporary artist. Her name is Cherie Stokes. It's beautiful Aboriginal artwork, and we decided to wrap the whole cover back and front in her art because it is stunning. And the theme of this upcoming magazine is Mother Earth, and all the various themes that come to mind when we think about Mother Earth. And yeah, so it's just been such a beautiful journey. But in every way that we can with this magazine, we want to highlight women. We have a section in the magazine called She Endeavours, where we highlight micro and small businesses that are run by women, that are owned by women, who have been really, as we all know, hit quite hard after COVID. So we basically run this little section. We highlight products owned by women that we think are fabulous, and we do it for free. And the other thing,
fantastic.
That's
fantastic. I'm just loving everything about this.
Thank you. And the other thing that we do in the magazine is we give free full-page ad space to charities and non-profits who are out there supporting women and children. And so we highlight 2 of them in every magazine. That's completely free, but it gets the word out about what they're doing. And through that, we've been able to highlight as well the female leaders of some of these incredible businesses, and we've interviewed them and got their story out there, how their charity started and why they started it. I think those things are really important, and I'm a huge believer. We call that our Pay It Forward initiative. I'm a huge believer that if we can help other, organizations who are doing extraordinary things. Yeah, we're publishing a magazine, but some of these organizations are out there on the front line really helping women who are leaving domestic violence situations, or they're supporting women who are going through their journeys with cancer, or they're non-profits who are supporting businesses in the outback of Australia who've been devastated by bushfires here and drought and now COVID. So if we can highlight them and people are made aware of what they're doing, I think that's one of the most precious and important things that we can do as a business. And we have to think of WB40 as a business. But if we can do that, then, I wake up every day, I can smile knowing that we've helped other businesses, and all of these small little businesses run by women are so epic. We all know what it feels like to start a business and to be, well, we don't, but if you don't know what it's like, it's tough out there to start a small business.
So you said this is digital, so people can find you digitally and subscribe that way.
Yes, so it's print and digital, so you have a choice, and we deliberately went digital. We know that a lot of women over the age of 40 and 50 and 60 actually want to hold the magazine in their hands. So they quite like that there's a print edition, but we deliberately wanted to make it digital as well, because it's more cost effective for people if they can't afford the print mag, which is fine, but also too because we've even got like writers in our magazine from America, and so that's been really nice. And I think to have an international kind of flavor has been really lovely, and we have that on our podcast as well. So digital is so easy because you can buy it, doesn't matter what country you're in. So you can head to wb40.com and head to the shop there, and you can basically buy the digital version. I think it's Australian dollars $7.99. I think it's under $10 US is what it works out to. And as I said,
I think it sounds, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in checking that out.
Thank you. So thank you, Joel.
Now I'm curious because this is a lot of work that you're doing. I can't even imagine all of the things that go into building a magazine. I know how much goes into a podcast, and there's a lot. So all the different editors, writers, artwork, what have you. So you're juggling a lot. Have you adopted any specific habits that help you manage this or that help you with your own success?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I learned really quickly was that I needed to forward plan. And as I said, although I can't micro manage the planning because things do evolve, I think I really needed to have a very clear idea for the next, 12 months from when I started. What is each edition going to look like? Because you really do need to forward plan in terms of who's going to write for each edition, what's the content going to be, because we went with themes as well. It was also about reaching out to cover artists and giving them enough time to decide if they wanted to be. Look, when I say to give them time to decide, we've been really honoured in that everybody that we've reached out to, I've had not one person say no yet, which has been incredible. And I think that is testament also to the fact that women understand this is a platform helping other women and that they want to be involved. And they also are so thrilled to get their artwork or their writing or their story out there. But one of the big things that I've done is actually, so I have almost like a planning calendar, if you like, that I know what each edition, the theme of it is going to be. That then I start reaching out to writers and artists. And once, almost like for me too, what I found was when I stumble across artists or when they're artists that I follow and I reach out to them, if I see something that instantly I think, oh, that's it, that's almost the artwork becomes the pivotal center, if you like, for the rest of the magazine. And so the third edition, as I said, having Cherise Stokes' beautiful, extraordinary artwork on the cover, and calling it Mother Earth, everything bound in. Her artwork is called Sacred Women's Business. It's really, so for me, I'm so proud and honored that she let us use it. It's incredible. But from there, really, you just know which direction you're heading in. I always knew that the third edition would be Mother Earth. We know that the fourth edition coming up is called Sisterhood. And what does that mean? And it really, one of the big things I've learned is to plan ahead and really have at least some idea in my head of what is that going to look like. One thing I've discovered about myself is that I didn't really know that I would do this, but that I have become, that being a creative director is being easy for me. And I'm really blown away by that, because I was thinking, how am I going to be a creative director? How are we going to earn enough money to hire one? Because how can I be one? Necessity. Then I became it. And then I realized I do have a really strong vision for the magazine. I think that's the other thing I would probably really recommend to anybody who's starting any sort of business. Have a very clear vision and idea about what it is that you're doing, and also the big one, why are you doing it? Because I think once you know that, and that sounds cliched as well, but I realize how true it is now. Once your why, everything else follows. It's actually easier to, you just come back to that all the time. Oh, it's really hard. I'm so tired this week. There's so much to do, but why are you doing it? And then that makes everything so much easier.
Exactly.
Yeah. And as you say,
there's a reason we have cliches.
Correct. And that's the thing. I used to always be like, oh, that's so cliched. But now I'm like, yeah, I'll own it. I'm happy to own all the cliches because as you say, there's a reason. There's a reason that they're out there. And as you say, like, you know, as a podcaster yourself, you would absolutely know that there's a lot of hard work in a podcast as well. I didn't know that when I started it. I'm very lucky, as I said, to have a partner behind me who works in the world of software and tech, and he's quite amazing. He is the podcast producer and editor. I'm very lucky to have that. I think what an extraordinary learning curve it's been to do a podcast even, and I'm very lucky to have that support. In terms of the magazine, yeah, look, it's a constant learning curve because, as I said, my partner is also heavily involved in the layout of it because he works in InDesign and different kind of software that people use to create magazines. And he also used to be working within the print industry. And so he had contacts, and I think that's been really great. So one of the other lessons that I've learned in all of this is to always ask for help. I'm terrible, and I think a lot of women are terrible at asking for help. We're the helpers. We're the doers. And it's really difficult for us to put your hand up and say, hey, I need some help. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I've joined an enormous amount of online groups of business women and online groups of just women. And obviously through WB40 and the Good Girl Confessional, we have an online private group for women as well. And
oh, great.
Yeah, and it's which is great. And we call it the Confessional, which is if you go to Facebook for the Good Girl Confessional, you can join the private group there. WB40 and the Good Girl Confessional is now obviously proudly the podcast of WB40, but they are two separate entities because we find some people follow both and some people really love the podcast. I've been following along for a long time. We have men, obviously, who follow along with the podcast. We've actually had some really lovely feedback from men on the magazine even, which has been really lovely. And I think in Australia, we've just recently had all these amazing sort of rallies that went on called March for Justice, when several young women came forward who had been sexually assaulted in the Houses of Parliament here and how badly handled it was by the government. And so I think there's this constant reminder for us as women that this is such a journey. It's not a journey that we've won as women, to have equality and equal rights and autonomy over our own bodies and all of the things. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you, we've been sitting back watching the political landscape in America as well. Yeah, it's a difficult one. But so I think for me too, every time you hear those stories, you think, when that happened, the March for Justice, and I was very lucky to be at that rally and really proud to be there, to be amongst so many women, and there were so many women, and realising that probably 2/3 of those women had a story or have a story about sexual assault or inequality or workplace harassment or whatever it may be, and worse, as we know. And so that kind of continues to inspire me as well to keep telling these stories. And after the March for Justice, just things like that, me putting it up saying I was there, I was at the rally, we had women who actually came forward and said, can I tell my story? In the first edition of the magazine, we had an extraordinary woman, Lisa Westgate, who shared her story, which was a rape story. So there are trigger warnings in some of these stories, and we make sure that we put those up as well. I know it's difficult and triggering for some people. And that was so brave of her to tell her story. And then after the March for Justice, other women have come forward. And so we've published, just this week, we published another story. It opens it up. And these are women over the age of 40 who are saying, hey, I've got a story that's happened to me. This is why these things are really important. So I think I guess that's my why. In sharing our own stories, in sharing the stories of other women, it inspires other women then to have a voice and to know that they're in a safe space where they can speak their truth.
It's so good. Thank you for your why, because you're doing a lot of good for a lot of people. I'm curious, is there one piece of advice that you would give people who might feel stuck or might feel struggling or trying to find their voice to help them move them a little bit closer to that success for themselves?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice, I would say, just do it. But if you're feeling...
It's my favorite slogan. I agree.
Do it. If you're feeling really stuck though, and I've been there myself and I get it, one thing that helps me is always to write it down. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I really want to do something different, I really hate my job, or I'm really unsatisfied in my life, or I know I want to do something, but I'm just not sure what it is, write down maybe 10 things that inspire you or that you love, or that you would, if money were no object and if time were no object, what would you want to be doing? Write it down. And it's really interesting. I once spoke to a woman about this and she said, oh yeah, but what if I wanted to be an astronaut? That would be ridiculous at my age. And I said, perhaps you could be writing about that. Perhaps you could be blogging about it. Perhaps you could be doing podcasts, talking to other women who are doing that. So there's all these other things that you can do. And so I think we try to limit ourselves all the time, and we all do it. Like, it's human nature. But I think write it down, really write it down, and then zone in on the things that you really love. Out of those 10, if you could highlight 2, what would they be? And then out of those 2, which one actually inspires you or gives you joy even thinking about it? And then think of new and innovative ways to do it. So if you say, I can't be an astronaut in my 50s, well, maybe not, but if that's your passion and you're in love with space and you've always dreamed about being an astronaut, innovative ways that you could be doing, talking about it, writing about it, or getting something out there. You could do a whole podcast on space exploration or whatever. The sky is the limit. And the other thing is too, people go, oh, I'm too old to podcast. How would I even start one? Honestly, make YouTube your friend, because there are so many tutorials on YouTube pretty much for everything you can imagine now. My big thing at the moment is I have a gorgeous part of our team, Debbie. She's gorgeous. She does our social media now. And I was talking to her about TikTok and she said, yes, you have to do it. Do TikTok. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do TikTok. But that is my mission in the next couple of weeks, to figure it out, because she's saying, oh, I
love it.
She's okay.
You're going to figure it out and you're going to go after it.
And I'm going to do it. I have no idea how to do it, but I currently at the moment, I write myself to-do lists every day. And that's another thing I would probably say, that if you're going to start a business and to not feel overwhelmed, to-do lists, and whether or not you plan them online or you write freehand. I actually write mine physically down. I go old school. And part of the reason I do that, I think, is when I write something physically, it kind of sticks. And then I'll walk away from my to-do list and really think about it. I start mulling it over, and then I'll come back and go, wait a minute, I've got an idea. And underneath the different points on the to-do list.
Well, that's actually scientifically proven.
Right. Okay.
It does stick when you write it down. They say that if you want to remember something, actually physically write it down.
Yep.
And on that note, I really resisted the writing. You're told to write things down all your life. This is wisdom that's been passed on, but we don't listen to it. I didn't listen to it for most of my life. And then I started writing things down, and that's when everything changed.
Right. Stuff starts to happen, because I feel like, for me, and obviously for you, and probably I'm so pleased to hear that scientifically proven. I'm like, oh, no wonder. Yes. Because I'm a writer, right? So you write. But in writing things down too, and this is why I say when someone's stuck, write down a list of 10 things you like, or you, whatever. You might be a film buff. I don't know, whatever it is. But in the writing things down for me, I then walk away and I just keep mulling that list over. You do remember the list and you keep mulling it over. And then I come back and think, you know what? That's not going to work. So number 4 on the to-do list will get scratched off. But then I think of 2 other things and go, oh, I have to do those. Then when I actually start ticking things off the to-do list that I've done, and I don't get to the end, because you never get to the end, especially if you're doing a magazine or whatever, I put it over. Everything that I haven't done is top of my list on the next day's to-do list, and it goes from there and it flows. And I think and then from there I find out what I'm most likely procrastinating about. There's some things that suddenly they're on the to-do list every day for 2 weeks, and I think, why aren't I getting to that? And that in itself is a process as well, because then I think, why am I resisting it? Is there a reason that I shouldn't be doing this? Or if I do need to do it, why am I resisting it? Sometimes it is the TikTok thing. Well, I don't really know how to do it. So then I have to go, right, well, you've been sitting on that now for 2 weeks. So this is what your goal is going to be. You have to go and find out. So instead of me putting on my to-do list, make TikTok videos, I've actually put on my to-do list, find out how TikTok works. So it just changes my mentality, because I think...
Oh, it's great advice. Really good advice.
It's so easy to procrastinate. I'm a big one for it. So my daughter was home the other day and she said, oh, do you want to watch this thing on TV with me? And I just went, yep, yep. Like, I had so much work to do. And then I have to... So then I have to bargain with myself. You can do that and spend the time with your daughter, which is lovely. And I was glad I did that. But then I realized that means I've got to work later that night, or I've got to get some stuff done. I give myself deadlines. And with the magazine, there's definite deadlines. So I can't hold other writers or people to deadlines if I'm not holding them myself. Yeah, so I think that's all of that is important. So if you're stuck, write it down.
That's really good advice. Thank you. So before we wrap up, this has been wonderful, by the way. I thoroughly enjoyed this. But I like this question just because you get really interesting answers. What are you sure of in life?
I'm absolutely sure, sincerely, that women matter. 100%. I'm absolutely 100%. That's it. I know that women matter, but I also know that our wisdom matters. And even though society will try and push us to the side once we hit the age of 40 and over, the reality is that women have so much. Women in this age demographic, we have life experience, we have hard-won wisdom, we have lived experience of stuff that we should never have to have lived through, but we all have. And we, in sharing that wisdom, we're helping the women who are coming in behind us. We're helping those women who are in their 20s and their 30s, and we're finding our own voice. And I think so the one thing in life I'm absolutely sure of is that women matter, and that women are equal in importance to men, and that society has a long way to go to catch up to this belief, tragically. And while there are a lot of, you always get this hashtag not all men, there's a lot of good men in the world, we know that, but there are also a lot of the world, sadly, is still run by white, powerful, wealthy men willing to oppress women. And so for me, the one thing I do know is women matter, and women over 40, our wisdom matters. All women, regardless of age, matter, and all of them. And so for me, yep, that's my one piece of truth. That's my absolute why on why I do what I do. And thank you. And I'm watching women who are my daughter's age, and she's in her early 20s, and I just see how extraordinary some of these young women are. They are breaking down barriers that we've been trying to break down for a lot of years. And I think that's so important. We need to listen to their voices as well. And it's really important, and I'm grateful to say that there's a lot of young women who are actually reading WB40, and we've had some lovely feedback from younger women saying, oh, I didn't know that. One of the women who has written for the latest edition, Carly Finlay, who's actually quite a well-known disability activist here in Australia, has written for the magazine, but she's not yet 40, but she said, I'm so grateful for this stuff because I didn't know anything about menopause, and I'm reading all these issues, like health issues around menopause, which which we feature in the magazine. Yeah, great writer, Catherine McKenna, who writes about menopause and different things that affect you. But Carly was saying, reading this, now I know what is going to happen when I get to that age, when I hit menopause, when I'm perimenopausal. And she said, no one talks about that. Why isn't anyone talking about this? And I said, exactly right. Why aren't they? For young girls, there's plenty of information out there about puberty now. We know about whatever, but women, every woman or everyone, not all women, sorry, not everyone who menstruates is a woman. We know that. But the reality is for anyone who identifies as female or for anyone who has to go through female hormone changes, whether it's at puberty or whether it's at menopause, that information really needs to get out there. And so we're quite happy to be talking about it. But it is important that in sharing that information and that wisdom, that younger women are saying, wow, okay, hang on, I didn't know that would happen, because no one's talking about it. So I think that's another thing that we're really proud of with this magazine is just nothing should be taboo. We can talk about female sexuality. We can talk about female biology. We can talk about all of the things that impact us as women and the emotional roller coaster that goes with it all, right? And I think that's the other thing too. I think that for your listeners, men and women who are over the age of 40, it is never too late to pivot, to do something new, to try something different, to learn new information, to change our views on the world that perhaps have been embedded. And just to remain open and realize that everyone's important. And if you give something a go and it doesn't work out, what's the worst that happened? You learn something amazing about yourself as well.
Speaking of which, there's a cliche I really don't like, and that needs to be eliminated. And that's you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That needs to go.
That needs to go. Needs to go. I don't believe that is true at all. I think
at all.
And I think that unfortunately when we're holding ourselves back, we buy into that sort of mentality. Oh, I'm too old. Oh, I can't learn this, or I can't whatever. Bullshit. And you look at like extraordinary women, say Iris Apfel, whom I love, who's a fashion designer in New York City. And I think Iris is in her 90s, late 90s, and she's glamorous and gorgeous and fabulous and has really wonderful things to say. I look at women like the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg and all she was achieving into her last years, still sitting on the Supreme Court of America and going, well, and clinging for dear life and being really political and saying, I don't want to pass away yet because Trump's in or whatever. I don't think that we can hold ourselves back using age as an excuse, because there are women who run marathons for the first time in their 50s, right? There are women who write their first novel into their 60s. You look at the extraordinary author Toni Morrison, like that. I'm just so, I look at women like, say, your Ellen DeGeneres and your Oprah Winfrey, and these are women not in their 20s. These are incredible, vibrant women in their 50s and 60s doing extraordinary things. And I think that we need to look more towards that. And in WB40, being able to highlight the everyday woman who's doing really cool things. And I think that's so important, and really important for society to grab hold of those stories and actually go, wow, women are kicking ass.
Yeah. I love that you've created with your magazine. You said that you have a group that people can join.
Yeah, we do.
So is this for people all over the world or Australia? Is it
all over the world? All over the world. So it's just women supporting women. It's free, obviously. If you jump onto the Facebook page for the Good Girl Confessional, and there you'll see a button. You can actually join the private group, which is called The Confessional. It is for women only, and you don't have to be over 40 to join the group, but a lot of the women are over 40 and over 50. It's just a group of women supporting women. So a lot of it is just funny memes, making people's day. People will put funny things up, or they put informative things up that have you read this article about menopause, or have you? But sometimes women ask for advice, and we just say it is a safe place, and anything that is talked about within that group, please keep it sacred and so people have a safe space to talk about things, whether it's I'm having real issues with my teenage son, or I'm in this really unhappy relationship, or whatever it may be, so that other women can give advice and help them and support them. And I think that's a really lovely thing. And as I said, it's all things. So once you're a member in there, and we do try and keep a very close eye on it. We don't allow any bullying or hate speech or racism or anything like that. I think it should be just a safe space for women to jump in and say hi and how you doing? So we do have people from England, we've got people from New Zealand, we've got people from the States. In there we've got people from Canada, which is nice. And yeah, it's a nice space. It's a really lovely space. So
I'm
everyone's
going to go check
welcome.
it out myself, Sandy. So
Good. Please do,
yes,
Jolie.
yes. So we'll have that. We'll make sure we have all of this information in the show notes for people so they can find you. They can find your magazine and your group and all of that great thing. I am so grateful for your time, Sandy. Before we go, is there anything that you wanted to add or share or that I haven't asked about?
The only thing I really wanted to share is a big thank you to you, Jolie, for all that you are doing to highlight how incredible life can be beyond the age of 40. So we are so in that space, and I'm just grateful. I'm absolutely loving your podcast. It's brilliant. And obviously when you share this podcast, I'll be sharing it too, but I'll be putting the word out for you as well. And the only other thing I will say as well is that I was very honored this week that there's a US new magazine, which is new, called Women Who Podcast, that's just come out. Kathy Barron is the name of the editor-in-chief, and she asked to interview me for the magazine, which was great. And I was actually on the front cover, so I'm a bit blown away by that. I'm a first-time cover girl for a podcasting mag, so I'm really thrilled about that. But I would say your podcast is so amazing to really check that one out as well, because she's really interested in talking to women who podcast and really chatting to grassroots independent podcasters who are women, and I think that's amazing as well. So what I'm finding through this journey is finding people like yourself, Jolie, and finding people like Kathy Barron, and realizing how many women are out there really wanting to support other women, and especially women over the age of 40. So that's very cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Congratulations on that. That's really exciting. Your first cover, first magazine cover. All right, Sandy, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful and enlightening.
Thank you so much, Jolie. Thanks so much.
I couldn't think of a better guest for the week of Mother's Day than Sandy Lowres, a mother of 3 who, when faced with tragedy all around her, divorce, business closure, father's death, successfully reinvented herself in her 50s. Instead of looking at her difficulties and thinking, failures, she adopted the successful growth mindset and turned this tough time into a massive learning opportunity. Sandy is the perfect example of the many ways that we can pivot and do new things and do great things after the age of 40. Society has been feeding us a rubbish story about aging, which has resulted in the dampening of the collective older spirit. I'm grateful for people like Sandy who are bringing attention to the amazing lives being lived in the second half of life. The only thing stopping your second half of life from being completely epic is you. For so many people, they have not learned how to follow their gut, to have belief in those internal feelings that drive us in the right direction. We end up sidelined, diverted, or unfocused because of these outside influences. Many of us move into midlife in a bit of a haze, hanging on to that busy life that has been created around us, reacting to all of the responsibilities that we carry each day, but not fully in touch with who we really are anymore. It really can take a shakeup or a midlife crisis to wake you up and realize perhaps you aren't exactly where you're meant to be. I see this happening all around, and it's important to share these stories so that we can A, feel normal, and B, learn and grow from one another. Learning the lessons from others can often stop us from having to experience difficult situations ourselves. Sandy feels this deeply. This is why her greatest professional success isn't about her. It's about building the community of women, sharing these amazing stories with others so that they can then help each other rise. Sandy is encompassing that golden rule in living a fulfilled life. In helping others, you find the greatest help for yourself. Helping others fills your soul in a way that no one else can take away. And that is truly a feeling of success. I love that Sandy's all about changing the narrative of women in society. Amazing women are doing amazing things everywhere, and they are helping other women achieve. Women do want to see other women rise. Women do want to see other women succeed. The narrative that women are bitchy and want to take each other down needs to be eliminated. There is no shortage of women wanting to support other women, and I applaud each and every one of you. Did you notice how Sandy kept mentioning the women she's worked with by name? She's giving them the verbal step up. This is what we all need to be doing. Who around you can you help? Who can you help lift up? Let's all keep holding out our hands to the women coming up behind us and giving them the step-ups we wished we had received ourselves. It's truly amazing what can be put in motion when one person has a mission to make something happen. Look at what Sandy did. She said, hey, I want to create this magazine celebrating women after 40. And what happened? She had countless amazing women step up and say, hey, I want to be a part of this with you. Let's make this happen. And ladies, let's not let men decide what is of interest to us any longer. They clearly are experts on the male species. Let's leave that to them and reclaim our divine wisdom of the female species. There are few things more powerful than a fired up woman. I'm so grateful Sandy did not let those male investors detour her from her goal. Sandy did not allow their misinformed judgment to stop her. She let it fire her up. Just watch me. Just watch me. Let this be your mantra the next time someone tries to stop you from doing what you know is important. By Sandy stepping forward and taking action on this project, she not only highlights the stories of women doing incredible things, but she's giving artists, writers, and photographers a place to showcase their work. She is giving good work businesses deserved publicity. She is stimulating the global conversation on what it means to be a woman in midlife. Think about what a huge difference one life can make with one suggestion. What difference have you been wanting to make? What is that passion project you have not been able to stop thinking about? What is that topic that fires you up? Sandy started a magazine, and let's be clear, a dying art form in a diminishing industry during a global pandemic. And guess what? People are here for it. They love it. So whatever excuse you've been giving yourself, trash it and come up with your solution. Think about the people you admire. Think about the people who are making big changes in life. People like Stacey Abrams, who's made huge impacts locally, resulting in massive impacts nationally. These people are stepping forth and giving voice to what's important to them, and they are finding the people to support them. You can too. Give voice to that which is percolating inside of you. Express your desires and your goals and find the people who want to support you on your journey. We are all capable of great things, and even more so when we come together with like-minded souls to make them happen. Find your tribe, and if you can't find them, do as Sandy did and create your own. We are all looking for a place where we can connect. I love how we can follow the threads of inspiration through other people's stories. And so often, we're influenced by those who have no idea they impacted us in such a way. Just like Sandy was inspired by the parent bloggers and their bravery, they gave her that motivation to open up about her own name and claim her brand. Who knows how many people Sandy herself has influenced through her blog, podcast, and magazine to help open up their own selves and be brave. You just never know how you make an impact in this world. The ripples are endless. Sandy brought up another important topic, changing the narrative about how we speak to ourselves and how we feel about our own selves. We can be so hard on ourselves, always trying to get things right. But so much of life is out of our control, and so often the way we want things to be does not align with how they actually work out. Learning how to be okay with this is transformative. It is okay if our best laid out plans do not work out. It is okay if we make mistakes. It is okay to be human. To err is human. We are learning through our mistakes. We learn from the challenges. Fully embodying this learning mindset, knowing this deep down and understanding this at your core is nothing less than living a free and empowering life. I used to be so harsh on myself. When I made a mistake, I would ruminate on all of the things I did wrong, mentally flag myself on perceived shortcomings. Friends, this is a torturous way to go through life. It's also a very sleepless way to go through life. Learning how to let go of the mistakes, learning how to forgive for your errors and instead look at the situation through the lens of learning, this has been one of the greatest gifts that I have received. It is as if I have been moving through life with heavy ankle weights and they were finally released. It is incredibly liberating. I now walk through life with an ease I never experienced in my younger years. These learnings, they come from the beauty of aging, from the beauty of your story unfolding. When you're young, you think life begins to end at the age of 40. This is the big lie. Life begins at 40. It's when you're just coming through the other side of life. You grow those longer legs and you take those bigger strides. It is when you start to come into your own, when you feel that empowerment and letting go of the judgment of others, finally owning and honoring that unique influence within yourself. Moving forward, let us all focus on celebrating and embracing the gifts of aging. Another good tip Sandy left us with is forward planning. The forward planning is vital for her magazine work. To have an idea of where they want to go with the issues and what it will look like each month is key to their success. The same goes for your life. If you want your life to look a certain way, you need to forward plan. You need to have a clear vision and an idea of what you want it to look like a year in the future and 5 years in the future, and then you can work backwards and create your month-to-month plan. If you're not sure of what you want, if you know that you want something different, but you haven't created that vision for yourself yet, take Sandy's tip and start writing things down. Write down at least 10 things that inspire you or that you love. Think about if money and time were no object, what would you do? What would your passion project be? Write it down. I am telling you, the power of writing things down is very real. I resisted writing, and I can't tell you why I resisted, but I did for years. And what I learned is that there is a certain kind of magic to writing down your dreams and goals. This is no joke. You want to see things start to happen? Write them down. Once you have that nice list that Sandy mentioned, that list of 10 things, then cut that list down to 2. Out of those two things, decide which will bring you the most joy. Once you have your topic, look for innovative ways that you can work that into your life. Can you write about it? Podcast about it? Video about it? Create a fan group around it, or join an existing group around the topic. Just bring that joy into your life. There are no limits. And if you have questions about a certain avenue, as Sandy suggests, make YouTube your friend. You can learn anything you need on YouTube. Finally, remember, it's never too late to pivot. It's never too late to learn something new. It is never too late to change our views on the world, to remain open and embrace our limitless capabilities. It is never too late to make a massive impact with this one short life you are given. This is my wish for us all, that we no longer use age as an excuse to hold us back, and instead embrace that vibrancy that lives within us, allowing our unique light to shine as a beacon to those around us. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Subscribe and follow us on all streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Player FM. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fresh Blood Podcast. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a like and sharing with a friend. I hope you make today a most fulfilling day.